Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. So today I'm delighted to welcome special guest Damien Dubose. Damien Terrence Dubose is a writer and speaker exploring the intersection of psychology, philosophy, and politics. He's the author of America's Ethical Archetype, where he examines American political leadership through Jungian psychology and rational ethics. His work argues that individuality itself depends on rational agency, and that an ethical society must be built on that fact. Fascinating. I have gone through Damien's book. I haven't read every single word, but I have gone through it, and it's a fascinating piece of work. So anyone who's interested in the interplay between psychology, philosophy, and politics, this is a really good book to get hold of and actually study, go through it in depth, because an awful lot of thought's gone into it. You can find Damien at damientdubose.com, DAMIENTDUBOSE.com. So, Damien, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that warm introduction. I appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for writing the book. How long did it take you to write it?
This book took me about 2 years. So it was kind of a frenzy. I had no intentions of writing a book in my life, but I came across a couple of ideas and they connected in my mind and just took me in a direction that I felt like I had to go. So 2 years after I had that feeling.
Fantastic. Well done doing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So in the prequel, I was asking you about your book and about your work and about some of the values that you think are really important, that are very important to you. And you said this one to me, which was respect for human individuality. And you felt this was important in general and important in regard to looking at politics in particular.
True.
Would you like to kick off by explaining what you mean, what your take is on what that means, respect for human individuality?
So as you know, I went through the book kind of through a Jungian lens. And so if I go to what he writes, the way that he writes about humans is more like we have collective instincts, and those instincts that make us very similar to each other are kind of like they don't separate us. They aren't the thing that we would point to when we would say this is what makes us an individuality. I mean, an individual necessarily, or our individuality. And so for me, also what I get from that is that our individuality grows out of our collective basis, or whatever, the way that we are social with each other. So it's not like isolated in a vacuum or something like that. It's something that we have to develop within the cultures that we grew up in. And so, but what I also get from that is it's rooted in decision making. It's rooted in judgment. And what I come to find is just that not everybody takes it's not necessarily responsibility, but they don't value personal judgment as much as others. And so that to me is what I get from what I read is at the root of the individual. And so to respect individuals, I have to see that aspect in another person. I have to have respect for their choices, respect for them as a sovereign moral agent in a sense. And so that's not as common as I thought it would be. And that to me, it's coming from America, understanding, doing my research and start thinking like, well, if this is at the root of what's going on in the country, or why it was founded, this is a different way of looking at the world. You have to kind of like educate and help people get to that level of understanding of the world and to have respect for other individuals in that way. So it's a long way to get to that, but that's what I meant by it.
Thank you. So you're making a connection there between, so first of all, you're saying that our individuality is something that we build from within the place of the culture that we're in. So that the culture,
I believe, yes.
Yeah, the culture is the thing that does not define our uniqueness as humans, but the individuality that we then go ahead and build ourselves. And then you're then saying that the individuality is a function of the judgments and the choices that we make.
Correct.
So if we're going to respect individuality, we have to respect other people's judgments and choices.
Correct.
That makes perfect sense to me, and that sounds really obvious in a way. So it's interesting then that it does sound obvious, doesn't it, when you say it like that?
It does. But I would say also that depending on the person who you're talking to, it would be, it sounds obvious, but then you talk to other people and it's not as obvious. It's not such just a immediately obvious idea. So
what the people who don't see it that way, what do they think respect for human individuality is? If they don't see the value of respecting other people's values and decisions and judgments,
right.
what do they then think?
So I've been doing a lot more work beyond this book, but what I come to just understand is that the history of the world has been more about identity, and maybe caste systems or social groups, and so people may find their identity in their work or in their race or in their financial brackets or something like that. And so kind of like to me it's just related to identity politics. It's not like I am a person. It's that I belong to a group that is important, which makes me important in a sense. So, and that's just a fundamentally different view of an individual from that sense, because the real difference in the line, the line that's drawn is, to me, an individual is about what the choices that they make and the values that they have. And some other people look at individuality as some kind of immutable characteristic or some situation that they identify with, not necessarily their choices, just some circumstance or accidental.
I
So
understand.
that's the difference.
Yes. So in other words, that would then be, well, the difference between you and me is you're a man and I'm a woman, or you're American and I'm British, or
Right. Something like that.
you're the podcast guest, I'm the podcast host.
Right. In some sense, right? Also, but it's always some type of power dynamic as well that I come to find. I can relate it to something like an oppressor and oppressor, from like a Marxist perspective, but it's always some type of power dynamic and a have and have not point of view.
That's interesting. So you're saying that the type of perspective on individuality, which is not the one that values choices and judgments, inevitably then goes into a power dynamic definition. That's it.
So
Kind of.
so interesting. So the way I always try to term it is, because I look at this as a story of development, and so I never try to look at it from a person goes from that to that dynamic. I always think of it like life itself is development, is a growth through that dynamic to the individual perspective. So I look at it as like a child, because to me, history is just like a child growing up. As a child, you're totally dependent. Your whole life is rooted in your parents or whoever is around you, their frame of reference. In a sense, they are the authority. You can't feed yourself. You can't take care of yourself. So more or less, there's just this understanding that you start to develop within society that, oh, first you figure out, oh, I'm not the same thing as other people. We are physically different people. And then you start to figure out, well, I have impulses, I have needs, desires and wishes. And then that's a step. But then you say, I guess in some levels, some people might refer to this as like the socialized mind level, where you're just saying, well, no, I have relationships and there are people who I interact with. So I want to have some understanding of where they're coming from. And if I look at it from a developmental standpoint, it makes it easier for me, because I don't really say that people get to a fork in the road and just choose one of these two angles or two paths. I say it to the point where they're developing, and either they continue or they stop.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense, doesn't it? Because I suppose the other thing is, even if we have like an epiphany where we realize something, we can also lose that in the next moment, can't we? We
Yes,
could,
we
and
absolutely can.
I can go through a whole day where some of the time I'm quite wise and some of the time I'm really stupid, you know, on the same day.
Happens to all of us. Right. Exactly. Happens to all of us.
I know. Mag. And so this, your connection with the respect for human individuality, is this something, well, you've spoken, you laid out the idea of development, right? Is this something you've always been really connected to? I mean, can you remember when you first really felt this connection with it for yourself?
Um, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's been a hard thing because I've just always assumed it through life, and I wouldn't say that I always assumed it at the level that I'm thinking of it now. I just always assumed that we had respect for other individuals and to some level their choices. The choices piece came more clear to me as I've gotten older, but just at a basic level, respecting other people for who they are has always been like a given to me. But then I start to understand or see that not everybody really has that respect for others. And something that I thought was just everybody knows is not something that just everybody knows. So that's what also brings me to the cultural piece, especially coming from America and American culture. It's like the mentality or the culture here has some level of that deeply rooted in it, deeply rooted in I'm me and you're you. You have to do your thing. I have to do my thing. And it's not a negative, it's a positive in some way. But I don't necessarily know that everybody's pulled apart all of the pieces to kind of try to do the deep dive that I'm trying to do in this book.
Yeah. So has it been like a kind of gradual? So it sounds like you had a good foundation to begin with in that sense, which is a great place to be, isn't it? And you know, so so great. And then it's kind of evolved, and your degrees of clarity and perception have evolved over time.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think
With
that's
effort.
that with effort. What kind of effort?
Just reading, being curious, right? Being curious and letting my curiosity lead me to the next step and not just saying, oh, I wonder about that thing and not taking any effort. So if I wonder about that thing, let me dig into this book for a little bit. Let me see what this idea is about. Let me see what a personality type is about. And using tools like, because to me, this came about for the most part from my days in college where they were giving like aptitude tests and trying to help me find a career path. And then I'm coming across these different aptitude tests and I'm seeing the connectivity between, the color tests and Jung personality types. And I'm trying to figure out what's at the root of this because I dug deep into it. And when I read it, I'm thinking, wow, this is very helpful. I can leverage this as a tool for life. So it became interesting. Then philosophy became interesting. Then the connection became interesting. So it's just a snowball effect.
Fantastic. And has it always been straightforward, or has it been hard? Have there been times when your, friends at college were saying, let's go out partying, and you're like, no, I'm more interested in exploring. What's it been like? Because I think sometimes people are curious about what the journey is like for somebody who creates something like this amazing book. Because you said you took 2 years to write it. That's 2 years
Correct.
on top of all the exploring you did before that.
That's true. That's true.
So
Uh,
it's,
I mean, for me, like this happens later in my life, I guess, because I'm a financial professional by trade. That's what I do in my day job. But I don't know if I would call it a calling. It's just something that is was extremely interesting to me at a personal level when I first was introduced to the ideas through like personality types, and I just thought it was a nice, cool thing. Then I started to form communities around it, and as I started forming communities around specific ideas, I would understand that like I could bring people together, and they'll have like an instant connection based upon what I'm this through line I'm seeing in psychology or personality types. So that was just an interesting idea for me for a while. And then I started to get into philosophy, but it wasn't until I actually read Jung. Like I was consuming Jung secondhand through like MBTI stuff, which is not necessarily Jung, but to be honest. But when I actually read Jung and then I started putting together the pieces with the philosophy I was involved in or reading, it just the light bulb went off. And so I just had to write the book.
Fantastic. I like that you created communities around it. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, well, we have Meetup here. I'm not sure.
We do. We have
It's
that.
Meetup. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so more or less I took some personality type. I took a specific angle from personality types, MBTI more or less. And it was just, if anyone's familiar, that they had the sensing, intuition, thinking and feeling piece. But to me, I saw this connection with intuition because I'm an intuitive type of a person. And so when I brought people together around that theme, like like going out and having meetups, what had my hypothesis, like I don't know if I can say it's proven true, but it wasn't proven false, that when we came together, it's just like an immediate connection. People just could talk, and I just felt like they were able to open up in ways that they aren't always able to do in day-to-day life. Because like if I give a little bit of my story quickly, it's just that, sometimes you want to talk about ideas and then you may be able to read the room and understand that not everybody is interested in ideas as much as you are. And if you ever put me into a room with a lot of people who are interested in ideas, like I can't stop. I can't go home, It's just thing I have to continue because it's like, oh, this is interesting. And then this person has a perspective and that person has a perspective. And so I'm just like fueled by, the not necessarily ability, but the desire to continue digging deeper into to ideas.
Very interesting. I've never heard that idea of creating a meetup group based on an aspect of your Myers-Briggs profile. That's just a very interesting idea. Fantastic. And I no wonder people felt they could actually just be themselves and allow themselves to relax and get into it. I imagine it was quite refreshing for a lot of people.
I hope so. Yeah, I think so. During COVID too. This was like either right before or after COVID, but yes, I hope so. And that was my intent to kind of like just give people a place where they can go and have the
Amazing.
connection that they don't necessarily enjoy anywhere any other
Amazing.
places.
So would you like to tell us a little bit more about these ideas around the connection between psychology, philosophy, and politics? Now, we've got nowhere near enough time to do this justice, which, of course, guys, buy the book. It really is worth it. But would you like to give us a little bit of a taste of what you're saying in the book?
Essentially, well, so in this particular book, I try to go through it in steps. Pretty much the preface is just what was inspiring me to write the book. Introduction is kind of preparing you to understand these ideas. It's giving you a basic framework around, America as its foundation. What was it built on? And essentially, I guess the main story is, in my perspective, each country slash culture or nation creates its foundation from a psychological perspective. And there's no possibility of being neutral in that perspective when you're creating or institutionalizing or building institutions around or in a nation or a country. And so that particular angle or perspective that America took, I kind of just go through these different essays written by objective or Ayn Rand mostly, but objectivist writers, where in my opinion, she definitely takes a certain perspective, and I'm analyzing her perspective through a Jungian lens. And I'm trying to get to the root of what kind of psychology is at the root of this philosophy, more or less. Because in my opinion, she has captured the American philosophy at its root better than anyone that I've ever read. Um, so, but taking that path, more or less, I'm just basically filtering down and funneling down to say, or to not in a purposeful way, but in a more of a diagnostic way, just to say, well, we can eliminate this perspective and we can eliminate that perspective, and we're left with one particular perspective that is truly the only pathway. I'm essentially saying that in the book, that only psychological pathway to get to a concept of justice rooted around individuality. And I know that might sound controversial to some people, but to me, based upon what we spoke about earlier, um, my understanding of individuality and what it takes to get to that level, I think it just becomes clear over the book as I'm trying to explain these different parts. So it goes psychology, then psychology to ethics, and then it goes ethics to politics. And in that way, I'm just trying to tell that stair-stepped story so a person can track every step that I'm taking on that path.
Yeah. So basically, you've rationalized the thinking journey to get from A to B. Although by the sounds of it, you went back and forth between different aspects of what you talk about in the book over the many years of exploring that you've done, and also the years of writing the book. So, you know, I think some of the best writers do exactly what you've just described. You know, where they've had an extended journey of exploration and discovery, and then they say, "Great, how can I lay this out so that someone else can get this in a weekend or a week or a couple of weeks, and not have to do X number of years exploring?"
That's true.
Get the
That's
basics.
exactly what I'm trying to do.
Exactly. Yeah. So, so you feel that Ayn Rand's description, her philosophy of objectivism, is pretty close to the original intention at the founding of America.
I do. I think she grasped it the best that I've ever come across myself. Yeah.
And does that philosophy match with the ethical approach that you are now recommending in the book, or is it something different from what she was talking about?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's the same. It's not one for one. I think like I've been playing with these ideas ever since I've written the book because I've been learning more, and so I think at some level, I don't know, at the root, I think she has it. I think some of the things that are discussed in her writing, it has a bent to it. And so if you read her understanding the the bias and, understand it in a way that I am I am trying to validate the bias in a sense. Um, I just think, I guess for me, if you don't, so I guess for when I'm looking at Jung, and what I think he brings to life is the ability to evaluate the bias. Because to me, philosophy just goes into the bias and brings psychology along with it. Whereas though Jung specifically will give you a means to say, well, here's what that bias is. Here's how to evaluate it. And it's not, he doesn't really have a perspective. I mean, you can find one, but it's not like you should do that. It's not a normative type of perspective. Whereas though you may find some psychoanalysts, like maybe Adler, where his perspective is almost like a philosophical perspective, from my opinion. Whereas though Jung kind of like takes the Freudian approach and takes the Adler approach and mushes it together and says, "Hey, you can go either way," you know. So
I think that's one of the things that's so appealing about Jung, isn't it? That, you know, whoever you are and whatever kind of person you are, he's not going to say you're wrong for it.
right, right, exactly.
It's like,
Find some kind of silver lining in it. That's how I look at it.
yeah, exactly. And that's of great value, isn't it? I suppose that kind of parallels this idea of actually respecting human individuality, because if you're going to respect human individuality, you can't say I respect human individuality except yours.
Right. Let me throw one piece because it just reminded me, right? So when I think of developing or the system developed around individuality, I think about what needs to happen at the top as far as leaders. But I don't envision a world where everybody develops to that level where they can conceptualize a system that can respect other people's individuality. And one part of that as a leader is to have the restraint to say, for someone who can't see that world yet, to allow them to be themselves without also without allowing them to violate what's established with that framework, if that makes sense.
Completely. Yeah. So you're respecting um, each person where they are, where they
Right.
actually are.
Right.
Yeah. Do
Right.
you imagine a culture where, you talk about um, people who are in a position to be able to conceptualize um, systems based on human individuality. So that's like a systemic perspective.
Correct.
What about the individual developmental perspective of I respect my own individuality, I respect someone else's individuality? Do you imagine a culture where there's like a growing level of that kind of capacity within individuals for respect for other individuals?
I mean, I think that's or the story of civilizations in a sense, especially when I look at history for America. I think so. There's this concept of like there are some people who are fully they're psychological types or this philosophical archetypes, and then there's the majority of people are just in the middle, in a sense, and maybe they want to journey somewhere, because new people are being born every day. We don't know where they are in their journey, if they're going to reach a different level or whatever. But I guess that whole thing is just the culture for many people, if not most, the culture influences them to adhere to the unwritten or written rules of the culture, in a sense. And so for me, this book is really all about leadership because leadership dictates. Um, and when I say that word, I don't mean it in a negative way, like a dictatorship. But leaders have to lead, and so we're leading toward the standard to a proper standard. And then, to me, a lot of people are just because the standard has been set, they aspire to the standard, or at least you know minimum to that standard. So I think a lot of people that's their experience.
I understand completely. And when you say leaders, obviously that could include politicians and other
True.
formal leaders.
True.
Do you feel as well there's something here for people who are more informal leaders, like parents and teachers and community leaders and people like that? Do you feel that it, or do you feel that this more is more for people in those more formal um, leadership roles, as it were?
I do. Um, I don't know if I would say I do it directly. So in the book, I kind of speak to philosophers and politicians. So for me, the plea to philosophers is please give us better philosophy. That's my plea. Um, my plea to politicians is not even a plea. It's just more or less of a framing of the proper roles I see for politicians in American society. But I do get into the everyday, and at the end of the book, I get into some more apply or how do you apply these ideas. But I guess for me, from a leadership, an informal leadership standpoint, my message would be to figure out how you fit into the whole. And because I look at it like this, I have a job. I'm not the CEO, but how do I fit in with my supervisor or the CEO or the director or someone like that? And in that way, I understand how I can be a leader to people around me. Um, and we need all of that everywhere. Um, so leadership is not just like one place at the top, like a king or anything like that. Leadership can be in all of those different places. It's just that this particular book wasn't meant for like uh everyday leadership in the workplace or something like that.
I understand. Yeah. It was interesting when I was going through it. My feeling was uh, the part of me that felt kind of fed or nourished by the approach um, was the part that values looking deeper into the relationship between the inner world, the psychology, and the interaction with others, and ethics, and then power. So, which is kind of loosely connected with that progression that you mentioned before, psychology, ethics, politics,
Right.
So all of that exists inside every individual as well as on the macro level in the culture, doesn't it? So
That's
we're
true.
all kind of trying to dance with our own relationships with all those things within us.
True. That's true.
So reading your book, was very interesting for me in terms of waking up bits of my awareness about myself and my role in the world, my contribution, my place, and how I sort of navigate that. So that's purely as an individual. That's not me as a leader per se.
Yeah, I mean, it's all there, right? Because to me, like you said, individual, I don't want to overstate anything, but I would say, one of Rand's things is that human psychology is kind of like, it's philosophy. It is philosophy in a sense. And so one of my arguments is that just as her philosophical structures, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, human psychology is more like perception, judgment, psychology. And those are kind of like parallel things to me. So that's why I'm just saying, like, from an individual standpoint, to me, that's how I would relate to that idea as myself as an individual.
Great. Well, it's healthy for us, as you say in the book, to actually penetrate down and think penetratingly about these things. And it's good for us, to use that muscle we have in our skull
Absolutely.
and explore these things.
Yes, someone has to.
Yeah, we might as well. It's a bit like if you have a body, you might as well exercise it. If you have a heart, you might as well love. If you've got a brain, you might as well think.
Exactly. Use all of it. Yeah.
Use all of it. Beautiful, beautiful. So there's a question I'd often ask people a question about what message they would like to give to leaders today. You've actually said a lot about that already. Is there anything else that you feel is really important that you'd like to say for people who consider themselves to be trying to be helpful in some sort of leadership capacity, whatever that might be? Anything that kind of intuitively you feel you would like to say to those people? Because some of those people will be listening to this conversation and sort of drawing their own conclusions. So I just wanted to give you a moment if there was anything else you particularly wanted to drop in that regard.
I mean, I think the most moving thing for me is, I don't know, tap into the root or the root of your whole outlook. Like, to me, especially as a leader, like, if we're talking about politics, this book is not necessarily just about politics, but political leaders are definitely a major target for this book. Tap into the root of your outlook, because one of the things I just really dislike is that we have these bits and pieces, these outlooks that don't attach to a holistic look of life. And it's just like, you just know how to do this thing here. And it doesn't attach to a full holistic view of life. And so I see a lot of people just get caught up in that segmented, uh, isolated like viewpoints of life. So to me, I'm just tapping into no life, human individual life is the source of everything that we're doing. And so all of my ideas, all of my suggestions are rooted in that source. And so to me, if you declare a perspective, even if you were to declare, no, the group, society itself is the source of moral concern, all of your conclusions in my mind should feed from that base perspective. And so I would disagree with you, but at least I think you would be tapped into your base root idea.
Wonderful. And of course, when we do tap into our base root idea, we can then actually test it, can't we? We
You
can
can test it. Yes. Yes, you
and then
definitely
find out how strong it really is, rather than just flailing around, wondering why I'm not
absolutely.
quite sure what we're doing. Yeah, which I've also done. Um, beautiful.
We all
Thanks.
have.
Thank you so much. So, Damien, it's a fascinating book, and I do recommend people read it. We've talked about quite a lot today. I feel we've traveled in a number of different directions. And I love the fact that you several times you've said you've learned so much since writing the book, and you're still playing with ideas and still exploring. Do you think there'll be another book?
So my focus recently has been on creating content around ideas. I mean, really quickly, I don't know if it's going to be another book, but I do believe in my mind that we've turned a bit of a corner when it comes to communicating ideas, just because of how much content is accessible to people, how to make it. Um, and so I think a lot of times things can be communicated or supported by visuals and movies or some type of holistic experience, sensory, visual, hearing, idea centric experience. So I've been focusing on trying to take my ideas and put them into visuals, which I do on my YouTube channel.
Aha, excellent. Well, I must make sure I've got the link for that in the show notes. So I'll make sure I've got that. I think you probably sent it to me. So excellent. Great. Well, thank you very much. Ongoing developing philosopher that you are.
I mean, I'm trying. The ideas are just so appealing to me that I have to go for them.
They really are, aren't they?
They are.
So, like I said, we've talked about quite a lot. Has there been for you a favorite part of our conversation today?
No, just being appreciative of your perspective. You reading the book and telling me what stands out to you, and it's interesting to me, just like speaking with someone from another culture, another country, about the idea of individualism, and maybe it's possible that we can kind of like a sim of what an individual is, so we can kind of pursue it in a better way. Because I think one of the reasons we can't pursue individualism truly is because I don't think we really know what it is, or we really haven't stated what it is. And so that's just kind of just having the conversation has been amazing to me. Thanks.
Beautiful, thank you. So our conversation has been part of the ongoing unfolding and learning for you and for me as well. These conversations always are like that for me too.
Great.
So I also value that enormously because it helps keep me giving me new perspectives, different ways of looking at things and reflecting on that and hopefully evolving as you're saying. So thank you thank you so much, Damien, for coming on the show. And thank you so much for writing the book. Wonderful piece of work. Everybody, thank you very much for watching or listening. Do go and check out Damien's website, which is damientdubose.com, DAMIENTDUBOSE.com. And I will put the link for his book and his YouTube channel and the website in the show notes. do check out my other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. And if you've enjoyed our conversation today and you think you might like to find out more about actually working with me directly, you can go to beingspace.world and find out what I'm up to. So thanks again, Damien, very, very much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate it. It's been a great time.